The night air above the smoking seas shimmered like hammered bronze as Drogon banked low over the ragged teeth of Valyria's broken towers. Daenerys Targaryen clung to the great dragon's neck. Her silver-pale braids snapped straight behind her by the wind. Her violet eyes narrowed against ash and embers. Below, the doomed scars glowed, rivulets of molten stone that seeped between shattered palaces and onyx colonnades. She tasted brimstone with every breath, yet something stronger than sulfur pulled her onward, a half-remembered promise pulsing in her blood. Here, amid ruin, the Dragon Lords had once commanded the world. If she was to claim more than the empty title left to her by exile and treachery, she would do it where dragons were born and empires burned. A rumble shivered up Drogon's spine. At first, she mistook it for his pleasure in the night flight, until his wings lurched offbeat. He roared, an ugly, throaty bellow that rattled her bones, and wheeled toward the nearest fragment of island. His landing was violence. Obsidian claws gouged black glass, vaulting smoke and shimmering sand. Daenerys slipped free, whispering gentle High Valyrian, stroking the scale-warm creases beneath his jaw. Drogon's eyes, ever pools of molten garnet, now swirled with threads the color of old brews. She drew back, a crust the hue of dead flesh webbed across the leading edge of his left wing. It crackled like dry clay when he flexed, flaking away in sickly gray chips. She had seen that color once before, on the wrists of a stone man who reached for her skiff in the smoking sea. Grayscale. No, she breathed, voice too small for the night. Dragons could not be taken by mortal illness, so every maester claimed. But the doom had not been wrought by mortals alone. Power lingered here, twisted, patient, seeking host and conduit. Drogon tore at his own wing as if the malady itched beneath the scale. Each rake of obsidian claw scored deeper grooves, and each groove bled nothing. Where living flesh should glisten, dull calcified scabs spread. He shrieked, staggering against a cracked basalt plinth that might once have been the base of a Dragon Lord's villa. The pillar crumbled. Shadow wings blotted what little moonlight pierced the sulphurous haze, and a storm of black glass shards skittered across the shore. Daenerys pressed both palms to Drogon's quivering muzzle. "It is a lie," she told herself more than him. "It cannot claim you." Yet the sickness bloomed, up the veins of his neck, down the ridge of his spine. The mighty scales dulled, losing the glow of living ember, gaining the chalky pallor of old tombstones. In the dull drift of volcanic ash, Drogon's fire died. She called him by every pet name she had made since Karth, by every grand title the freedmen of Meereen had sung in marching cadence. She sang the nursery rhymes of Valyria, broken by her mother's accent and her own. Nothing coaxed a spark. The dragon's breaths came shallow and sharp, mists of ashen air hissing through dwindling nostrils. Finally Drogon settled, one colossal wing drawn over his ribs like a lizard seeking warmth. Stone crept across his lips, lusterless eyelids sagged. She felt the last tremor of his furnace heart through the sand at her knees. When silence returned, it was the silence that follows calamity, a hush scraped raw by things too loud to name. The mother of dragons knelt before a heap of mineralized flesh and could not cry, for even grief seemed stolen. Ash fell thicker. Every flake that touched Drogon stayed, fusing to the calcified hide, turning him into a new statue among countless others scattered through the aisles. Some part of her mind tallied the cost. Without Drogon she was only a claimant, not a queen. Without his fire she was yet another exile drifting between kingdoms that did not want her. But the deeper wound was older. The little girl who had hidden from Viserys in Illyrio's manse wept for the only creature that had never sought to use her. A soft crunch sounded behind. She spun, hand on the hilt of the arak she carried since Meereen. A figure emerged from the sulfur banks, cloaked in rags caked the same grays as the island's ash. His gait was stiff, scuffing rather than stepping. Stone men haunted these shores. She knew the stories. Any scratch could doom a woman to living death. Yet this one halted at the boundary a few paces distant, head bowed, as though cowed by the same awe that chained her to Drogon's corpse. He or she, slowly uncurled fingers from the folds of cloth and revealed a length of black iron the size of a child's femur, studded with dull gemstones. The rod pulsed once, faint crimson, and the stone man laid it reverently upon the ground before retreating into gloom. Daenerys did not chase. The smoking sea swallowed the figure instantly. Left alone with rod and corpse, she stared down at the relic. It was grotesque, a malformed wand that drank what little starlight remained. When she reached, heat pricked her fingertips. Not searing, but insistent, like the first touch of a hearth come winter. Symbols prickled up the shaft, sigils of the freehold, glyphs older than Aegon's conquest. She could not read them, but they thrummed in blood and bone, waking a memory deeper than language. Valyrian, she whispered. The name rippled outward, setting tiny vortices in the drifting ash. Valyrian the Black Dread, firstborn of Valyria's last exalted line, bigger than towns, wings so vast whole armies marched in shadow. Even his bones, they said, were too great to fit in any hall save the cavernous throne room beneath the Red Keep. Yet before the Targaryens, before conquest, Valyrian's lair had been here, in the heart of the freehold. The doom had shattered mountains and boiled seas, but it could not dissolve the bones of the greatest dragon who ever lived. She remembered tales Viserys spat in candlelit tents, each meant to goad her imagination toward the Iron Throne. He claimed Aegon found Valyrian's skull upon the fused stair of Dragonstone, yet maesters and pentos whispered otherwise, that Aegon chanced upon the remains wedged in a rent of smoking rock outside ruined Orys, and the black skull's hollow gaze bade him cross the narrow sea. Whatever the truth, some part of the Black Dread lingered here. Daenerys closed her fingers around the rod. A tremor jolted up her wrist, a heartbeat not her own. In its wake, blooms of ember red rose beneath her skin like glimmering veins, fading an instant later but leaving heat behind. The rod's dull gems erupted in fire, no gentle glow, but pillar candles of living scarlet flame that did not consume the iron. She flung it away in panic, yet it arced neatly, embedding point first beside Drogon's petrified flank. Cracks snaked through the gray crust at the point of impact, spreading like lightning across his ribs. Daenerys scrambled back, terror choking reason. She had prayed 1,000 times for miracles. Never had she considered the price of one granted. The fissures widened. Stone flakes burst outward. Underneath the gray crust, Drogon's scales flickered ember red once more, but the color was wrong, too deep, bordering black. The corpse convulsed, not with the twitch of revived flesh, but with an external force shaking it apart. Each spasm shattered more grayscale husk. From the hollows between broken scales poured glittering ash, then something coarser, chips of onyx, chunks of obsidian, shards of fused bone longer than her forearm. She watched Drogon's body disgorge the relics of other dragons consumed within Valyria's bowels, disgorge history, disgorge itself. The hollowing continued until little remained but a warped shell, its interior caved, an egg after hatching. Within the cavity, darkness pooled. It formed a shape too vast to fit, impossible for sight to hold. A silhouette of wings stretching beyond all reason, a maw big as a moonless chasm. Heat roared from that void, but it was cold heat, star heat, older than life. Daenerys felt her tears dry upon her cheeks. The rod pulsed again. She could not hear, yet an instruction resonated. Blood for bone, fire for flesh. A gift owed. She had no dragon left to offer fire, but blood was easy. She drew her arak across her palm. Scarlet droplets fell upon the churned ash. As each drop touched, the ground hissed, devoured fluid without trace. The void shape stirred. A current of wind coiled out, tasting the air with the hunger of ages. It smelled her offering. It smelled her. In that breathless interval she understood. Drogon's death was not theft but exchange. The Doom had bartered with her flesh to purchase passage for something older, something whose shadow still haunted the nightmares of every smallfolk mother across the narrow sea. She had come here to claim the legacy of the Freehold. The Freehold had answered. Winds heaved upward. Ash ascended in spirals. The world became a throat-drawing breath to scream, and flame shot skyward, radiant crimson shot with pitch-black tongues. Daenerys staggered but did not flee. Her bloodline was born for this fire or none. The storm collapsed into silence, so sudden it rang. Then came a sound older than speech, the grinding groan of colossal vertebrae long refused motion. A shape coalesced, no longer formless shadow, but bone. Valyrian's skull rose first, twin eye sockets vast as galleys, fangs like pale towers of basalt. Yet it did not remain bare calcium. Veins of ruby magma veined the fossil, knitting fractures. Filaments of ember soot braided into ligament and sinew. Bone darkened, enamel turned glossy black. Ribs blossomed from the dust. Wing fingers unfurled and grew membranes wrought of living shadow stitched with glimmering sparks. By dawn's first pallid smear on the horizon, a dragon stood where only shards had lain. A dragon of bone and ember, half corpse, half starfire, its bulk dwarfing every tail. Its wings beat once, thunderhead slow, raising spirals of molten sand. Daenerys faced the beast and knew terror's final shape. Yet her heart hammered not with dread alone but with answering fury. All that had been stolen, her child, her kingdom, her trust, lingered in this monstrous resurrection. The rod smoldered at her feet. She bent, wincing as blood from her palm spattered its iron. When she rose, Valyrian's skull lowered, nostrils flaring. He exhaled, and the exhalation was a furnace's breath across a desert. Yet it did not scorch her. The wind parted around her body like water. Daenerys stepped forward, her boots sunk in quick-melting sand. She extended the wand. Valyrian's eyes, a galaxy of ember motes, fixed upon her. Within their glare she glimpsed faint reflections. Shadowy perches of Maegor's Holdfast, streets of Old Volantis, the whipping posts of Astapor, all places where dragons once decided the world's fate. She saw, too, her own reflection, a scarlet-robed queen crowned by ash. "Serve," she said, voice raw from smoke, "or burn me with you. I have no more to give the world but fire." Valyrian inhaled. His maw opened, darkness at its core deeper than eclipse. Daenerys braced, refusing to flinch. A ribbon of black flame flickered out, coiled around her like a grand vizier's sash. No pain touched her flesh. Instead, cold clarity cascaded through her nerves. The flame sank beneath skin, racing along arteries, branding her bones with sigils that echoed those scored upon the rod. When it passed, she felt lighter and yet vast, as though the horizon had folded inward to nest behind her eyes. The great dragon bowed. Wings swept low, forming an aisle. Daenerys advanced, heart a drum of destiny. She set one palm upon the ridge where fossil had turned to furnace-hot scale. An oath neither living nor dead resounded between them, sealing rider to mount. The last daughter of old Valyria had traded living flesh for deathless wrath, and the doom of men accepted. Behind her, the calcified husk that had been Drogon collapsed into powder, wind scattered across the smoking sea. Valyrian the Black Dread, reborn not of flesh but of imperishable bone fire, unfurled wings whose span blotted half the sky. Daenerys vaulted to the spiked saddle ridge. No tattered harness, no chain of brass. She rode barehanded, fingers sunk into ridged scale. With a single thunderous beat, the dragon rose. Down below, the islands of Valyria shrank into molten freckles on an endless cloak of night water. Stars fled before them. Every wind howled Valyrian greetings that no tongue had uttered since the doom. She watched dawn bleed rose gold over the horizon, and felt in her marrow that the world beyond had not yet learned to fear what flew toward it. But they would learn, as Meereen learned, as Astapor smoldered, as Karth whispered ghost stories about the Silver Queen and her laughing fire. Only now her fire laughed with hollow jaws, and its breath smelled of grave dust and destiny unmet. The rod dissolved in her fist, leaving a smear of ash that wind stole. She lifted her burning hand to the sky, feeling nothing but chill admiration for the vast silence ahead. Somewhere, across waves and continents, an iron chair of swords still dreamed of masters. She would answer its dream not with petitions or parchments, but with the thunder of wings older than kings, the promise of fire that could never die, and the memory of a son she had given to wake that fire. High above the smoking sea, Valyrian roared, an ancient, bone-deep dirge, and the sound cracked the sky like thin ice under heavy boots. In distant Essos, fishermen looked up from nets to see the clouds riven by a vein of black lightning. In King's Landing, atop the Red Keep, ravens stirred restlessly in their coop, though dawn had barely touched the spires. The world felt the heartbeat of something that should have stayed buried, and shivered in its chains. Daenerys closed her eyes, let the wind carve tears from her cheeks, and whispered the only prayer she trusted, Dracarys. The sunrise that greeted Daenerys upon leaving the smoking sea was a thin rose-tinged blade slicing the charcoal sky, and she rode it westward with Valyrian beneath her like a living continent of shadow. The wind at this height was knifing cold, yet heat bled up through the great dragon's ridged spine, warming the leather of her riding trousers until it smelled of singed oil. There were no reins, no saddle, only the rise and fall of ancient bone fire, the thunder of titanic lungs, and a rhythm between rider and mount that seemed older than either. She felt it with every heartbeat, a cadence that demanded surrender, shaping her will into something vast enough to match the creature she commanded. Below, the smoking sea shrank to a plate of restless steam. Daenerys watched the ruin recede, feeling a pang as Drogon's burial ash vanished into distance. Yet grief no longer pressed flat and cold. It smoldered, molten at the core, welding itself to purpose. Each beat of Valyrian's wings pounded that purpose deeper. They crossed the rust-red coastline of ancient Illyria by mid-morning. In the fields beyond, shepherds stared open-mouthed, crooks half-raised, as a dragon larger than the hills blotted half the sky. Valyrian's shadow rolled over ramshackle streets, stone aqueducts, and crumbling watchtowers draped in ivy, sparking alarms of temple bells unused since the century of blood. She glimpsed children scrambling onto rooftops to peer, faces pale and awestruck. 1,000 legends were born with every wing beat, and she marked each town on an invisible map of loyalty and dread. By nightfall, she set Valyrian down in the stony bowl of a dried caldera north of Mantaries, where the land was too cursed for crops and the air too hot for comfort. Obsidian boulders ringed the hollow, cracked by old lava flows that still glimmered faintly beneath their glaze. When Valyrian folded his wings, the tips still jutted beyond the rim, black sails against stars. He exhaled, and jets of ember spark fanned across the basin like smith fires catching oil. In that glow, Daenerys examined the stony membranes, marveling at the way they blended fossil and flame. Veins of molten glass pulsed like arteries, but between them the webbing was as thin as parchment and as tough as forged steel. She dismounted, boots sloshing through dust that hissed like kettles. Her palm still bore the thin scar from slicing it in Valyria, yet the flesh around it glimmered faintly crimson whenever moonlight touched. An echo of the sigils burned into her bones. She flexed her fingers, half expecting sparks, but only a deep warmth stirred beneath skin. Far above, vultures circled, drawn by the stink of scorched rock. They quickly wheeled away when Valyrian's eye flames drifted toward them. Daenerys smiled. Even Carrion lords knew when to cede the skies. Yet for all her newfound might, another hunger gnawed: news. She had left Meereen with Drogon scarcely 2 moons past, intending only a solitary pilgrimage to Valyria's heart. By now the city would buzz with rumors of queen and dragon vanished. Tyrion would hold council in the Spring Palace, juggling Friedmund's factions and Yunkai's inevitable posturing. Dario would chafe, pacing the commanderies of Hisdar's old unsullied, dreaming of battlefield glory. And Hisdar, restored to privilege if not power, would whisper treason in perfumed baths. Without Drogon's presence, how long before enemies guessed she was more vulnerable than ever? Except she was not. Let them guess. Let them spend coin on sellswords and ink on secret letters. When she returned, she would do so astride dread itself. But first she needed eyes and ears. Mantaries lay 2 days' ride south. Slave markets, plague vaults, unspeakable rituals to darker faces of the Valyrian pantheon. She had flown above its copper domes once, but never walked its red-paved streets. A queen might stride openly. A tactician slipped in unseen. Besides, the old mercantile houses there still trafficked in gossip shipped upriver from Meereen. If any realm knew her city's heartbeat, it would be Mantary's. She prepared a small pack: a waterskin, strips of dried goat, a coil of silver wire, the rod's ashes collected in a stoppered vial of glass. Though she did not know why she preserved them, only that intuition hissed, "Keep what the doom leaves you." Her arack remained at her hip. Her Carthene silk tunic she folded away, donning instead a rough tunic dyed a dull rust, with a hood deep enough to shade silver hair once braids were tucked. The transformation felt like slipping into one of Varys' little birds, yet she remembered what Tyrion had said of power. Sometimes the lion's roar began as a mouse's whisper. Before dawn she set out on foot, leaving Balerion coiled like a mountain of midnight. She pressed a palm to his warm snout and murmured a promise to return by sunset. His response was a rumble that shook loose pebbles from the crater walls. As she descended into scrubland, the world felt suddenly smaller, the sky's vastness no longer caged by wingspan. Mantaries greeted her with the stench of tanneries and the clang of forge bells. Guttering torches cast greasy halos on walls etched with serpents devouring their own tails. The eastern gate took a copper coin to enter, another to pass unmolested by plague wardens in cracked porcelain masks. She let them believe she was Easterling caravan crew, come to sell obsidian trinkets scavenged from ruined isles. Her accent, a melange of Valyrian city dialects, served as plausible mask. Within, the city sprawled a chaotic spiral of alleyways and bridges over dry canals. Street vendors hawked flensed lizard hearts promised to cure barren wombs. Lepers chimed bells for alms. Gaudily painted slave girls in feathered collars advertised themselves with little fans depicting twisted sexual positions. Daenerys slip. Ed passed facades of carved black basalt showing scenes of the doom. Entire families caught mid-scream, slave legions melting in lava, dragons ablaze with living tar. The Mantarine considered such grotesquerie protective. If you honored the doom's glory, it spared your walls. She followed the spice trail toward the central forum where trade caravans from New Guys camped. There, along the perimeter of a hexagonal cistern, stood taverns catering to mercenaries. The Strangled Mare, the Copper Sphinx, and, exactly as Tyrion described in one of his wry-drunken speeches, the Flayed Bishop, a den of dice and rumor. She entered beneath a signboard showing a robed priest with his flesh peeled in ribbons. The air inside was thick with hemp smoke and the sweet rot of fermented mare's milk. A harpist played forlorn Valyrian chords on a dais. At small round tables sat hardened men and women in mismatched mail. Above their heads dangled severed wyvern claws gilded in bronze. Daenerys ordered watered wine from a barmaid whose cheek bore the gray lattice scars of childhood grayscale, proof she had survived the stone men's kiss. The woman's eyes flicked to Dany's scarred palm but asked no questions. She found a shadowed booth overlooking the dice pits. There, two former unsullied and patched sashes whispered in Giskery about troop movements near Meereen. Yunkai had mustered 4,000 cell spears from the Company of the Sun. New Guys promised 50 trebuchets in exchange for 1/7 of Meereen's harbor fees should the city fall. But one mention chilled her more: the word Dragon Slayer. Apparently, a Sellsword captain from Volantis claimed he bore a scorpion bolt tipped with star-forged steel that could pierce a dragon's heart, if the price was right. She sipped wine, mind racing. Without Drogon, the rumor might coax her enemies into reckless haste. With Balerion, it might coax them into suicidal panic. Either outcome could serve, provided she kept momentum. Another table hosted half a dozen ragged priests in cracked terracotta masks shaped like languid women's faces. They muttered of religious portents. One had dreamed a black sun devouring the day. Another foresaw blood-red rain over Slaver's Bay. A scarlet acolyte of R'hllor, face scarred by self-inflicted burns, argued that both visions heralded the second coming of Azor Ahai. They quarreled whether the champion would rise in Volantis or in the smoking ruins of Valyria itself. She left them to their prophecy, yet every syllable fed embers in her brain. Azor Ahai, wielder of Lightbringer. Many looked for him in the shape of a king or knight. who considered the possibility of a queen whose sword was a dragon's flame. She imagined Valyrian silhouetted against night, a blade of black fire rising from his jaws, and almost laughed. By noon she had gleaned all she dared without exposing herself. On the way out she paused before a parchment pinned to a tallow-streaked pillar. A rough sketch of her own face, silver hair streaming dragon wings behind. The reward beneath was 50,000 honors in gold. For information leading to the capture of the pretender queen. The edict wore the sigil of the Yunkish wise masters. She tore the poster down, folded it into her tunic, and strode into sunlight. North of the forum she found a quiet courtyard where a dry fountain sprouted cracked marble vipers. There she sat, listening to market noise and echoes, and compiled her plan. Return to Valyrian by dusk. Strike north along the Skahazadan, collecting windtails of Meereen's troubles. Gather strength in the Dothraki Sea where stray Khalasars might kneel to a dragon larger than their gods. Then swoop upon Slaver's Bay before Yunkai's armies could siege. Speed was key. A scuff behind her. She turned to see a boy no older than 6, ribs like bow staves under thin skin, holding out a clay figurine of a dragon painted black-red. "For you, lady," he said in thick Mantarine. His eyes were cavernous, pupils ringed with unnatural yellow, a sign of canal fever. She knelt, produced a copper star, and placed it into his palm. "Where did you find such a dragon?" she asked. He pointed skyward. "Dreamed him." The word pinched her heart. She touched the figurine's wings, sculpted bone ridges, flame scoring along the belly. "You dream true," she whispered. She pressed another coin into his hand and fled the courtyard before tears could betray her. The journey back to the caldera passed swift beneath her boot soles, driven by urgency. Yet as she crested the final ridge near nightfall she halted, blood ringing. Riders circled the crater in silhouette against a smoldering sunset. A dozen, maybe more, mounted on rangy sand-colored horses. Their armor was odd. Patches of boiled leather and lacquered plates painted ash gray, tusked masks concealing faces. Each bore a short recurved bow tipped with obsidian arrowheads. Her heart clenched. They were not Dothraki, not Yunkish, not of any free company she knew. They rode with silent purpose, forming a wide perimeter. Valyrian lay coiled within, head resting on folded foreclaws, apparently asleep. But no, she knew that half-lid posture was watchfulness. The riders seemed to know it too, for none dared approach within arrow range. Instead they spaced themselves evenly, as if marking ritual points around a sacred fire. She crouched behind a basalt spire, weighing choices. Attack on foot meant death. Calling Valyrian without alert risked none. She drew the bone-handled whistle Tyrion once gifted, carved from harpy bone, audible to dragons though not men, and pressed it to her lips. The silent shriek vibrated her teeth. Valyrian's head snapped up. His eyes flared star-bright. In a single heave he rose, shaking loose boulders. The riders jerked reins, several horses rearing. 2 archers loosed reflexively. Arrows clinked harmless against scale. A low roar rippled outward, vibrating her cloaked ribs. The masked cavalry tightened formation, but still held ground. Daenerys stood, slipping between outcroppings until she emerged onto the rim, cloak snapping. "Hold!" she shouted in Valyrian. Some turned toward her, confusion writ in their rigid masks. She extended arms. "I am Daenerys Stormborn, mother of..." Before the title left her tongue, one rider raised a hand trimmed with silver nails and blew a conchhorn. A harsh braying answered from the north, deeper than any horn of man or beast. The ground trembled. From a ravine beyond the crater's lip rose a shape like iron-wrought flesh. A great gray beast twice the height of a warhorse but squat as a boar, hide plated in stone scales that glinted like shale. A single eye, ovoid and milky, bulged at the center of its forehead. The creature lumbered forward, dragging iron chains secured by 3 riders perched on its armored back. "As Zorvagar," she breathed, recalling dusty Pentoshi scrolls describing the Valyrian war beasts bred in mantaries for siege. Thought extinct since the freehold's fall. They were blind but followed the scent of certain alchemical oils. Its breath steamed frost despite the volcanic heat. Valyrian's neck straightened, his wings half unfurled. The rider's trap was clear now. Distract the dragon with arrow gnats while the Zorvagar advanced to vomit its infamous stone frost, petrifying whatever it touched. Daenerys stepped to the rim's edge and ripped off her hood. "Fly!" she commanded in High Valyrian. Valyrian needed no second bidding. With a blast that flattened scrub, he propelled upward, ashes whirling in a funnel. Archers loosed. Obsidian shafts shattered midair against turbulence. The masked cavalry scrambled, signaling the Zorvagar handlers to tighten chains. But the war beast did not flinch. It opened a maw filled with stalactite incisors and belched a torrent of gray mist that fanned across the crater like spilled mortar. Wherever the cloud touched rock, a sheen of white stone raced outward, calcifying sand into marble. Valyrian banked, avoiding the plume, and circled to strike from above. A pulse of black-red flame erupted downward, meeting petrifying mist midair. Steam exploded, whipping banners of scalding rain. The riders nearest screamed as droplets ate through armor, flesh, bone. Horses bolted. A second wave of arrows fizzled before reaching altitude. Updrafts flung them lazily aside. Daenerys sprinted down the slope, sliding on loose scree. She must mount before the beast turned its frost breath on her. Valyrian met her halfway, tilting one wing so its lower edge scooped her beneath armpits, flinging her upward with a rush of hot wind. She landed astride the neck ridge, locking fingers into ridges that flexed around her grip. She breathed once to center. Then she leaned close to the bones such that her lips brushed living embers and whispered, "Break them, Valyrian dove," an avalanche of darkness. His roar hammered dust into waves. Flame jetted, this time not in one focused lance but in a broad river that swept the cavalry line. The heat was wrong, colder at its heart, a void fire that charred yet did not burn. Ash drifted where flesh once was. Two riders managed to hold onto charred saddles even as their mounts evaporated into powder. The rest scattered, some aflame, some frozen mid-stride by stray frost that still hissed through steam. The Zorvagar bellowed, iron chains grinding as it swung its massive head side to side. Its single eye fixed on Valyrian's silhouette, and again it spewed petrifying cloud. Valyrian met it head-on, jaws gaping. From his throat surged not flame but a column of perfect night flecked with ember stars. When it struck the frost mist, the petrification reversed. Stone crumbled back into dust, the warbeast's own breath recoiling into a shroud that consumed its plated hide. Cracks webbed across its scales, glowing with internal heat until the creature burst, raining shards of gray crystal across the caldera. The remaining riders broke. One flung a side mask, revealing a gaunt woman tattooed head to ankle in serpentine Ouroboroi. She sprinted upslope, only for Valyrian's tail to lash out, pulverizing her into the earth. Others fled into ravines, dropping bows, screaming prayers. In minutes the battle ended, leaving only wind-scoured silence, steam rising from rapidly cooling marble patches. Daenerys inhaled, shaking, not from fear, fear felt distant, irrelevant, but from awe at the power she wielded. Yet she had nearly erred. She had underestimated what relics of Valyria's art might survive. If Mantaries commanded such extinct horrors, what else waited in vaults beneath Yunkai or Volantis? The game had changed. She must adapt swiftly. She guided Valyrian to a perch on the rim, surveying devastation. Already scavenger crows circled ruined corpses. Among broken riders, she spotted a gilt scroll case still clutched by a severed hand. She sent Valyrian's heat downward until metal softened. Then she descended to retrieve it. Inside lay a single parchment inscribed with angular glyphs and a wax seal bearing twin masks. Comedy and tragedy fused. The language was Valyrian but dialectic Mantarian. She deciphered slowly, to the exalted master of chains, Mantaries. The dragon woman has not returned to Meereen as of this moon. Our spies confirm her absence has weakened the unsullied garrison. Rebellion stirs among the brazen beasts. Should she attempt to pass our borders, employ Protocol 12, Zorvagar, and the Ashen Circle. If captured alive, deliver her to the temple of the final Wyrm for transmutation. If slain, preserve the dragon's heart. The alchemists of Volantis will reward thrice its weight in jade. Archon Sornero Roger. She crushed the parchment in her fist. The Ashen Circle, so that was their name. She looked at the dead riders, noting silver-tipped nails on each. Disciplined, fearless, devoted to arcana. They would not relent. Good. Remounted, she issued a silent directive. Valyrian rose over the caldera, turning his gaze north. There, across parched flats and thin forests, lay the Skahazaden Valley, then Meereen beyond. Yet a thought coiled. Strike Mantaries first, break their capacity to meddle. But Meereen could not be left to fall. She charted compromise, a demonstration. Valyrian wheeled south instead. The horizon accepted them with open crimson arms as dusk ignited. Before full dark, they were over Mantaries. Bells clanged, horns wailed, and torch lines raced along walls. She let them rally, let their catapults wheel onto parapets. Then Valyrian loosed a single gout of inverted flame, void fire laced with ember constellations, into the central temple where priests prayed to scorpion-tailed angels. Stone melted, towers drooped like wax, molten stained glass spattered squares in jewel rain. She spoke one word loud enough for any who survived to hear. Remember, she left the city burning but not ruined. Terror would do more than rubble. They flew through night, chasing the moon across dunes and river deltas. Occasionally she spotted campfires of Dothraki scouts. Each time she dipped low, letting the black wings cast dread across their fires. She heard distant war cries as Khalasar outriders galloped to follow. 2 days later the river Skahazaden unrolled beneath, a dark ribbon flanked by orchards and wind-blown palisades. Smoke plumes rose ahead, Meereen's harbor, unmistakable. She angled downward, seeing gleams of siege lines bristling outside eastern walls. Yunkai's tents like dun mounds of scabbed flesh, trebuchets hunched, banners depicting the golden harpy of Astapor's remnant slavers. In the bay rode 3 Giscari Dramans, their prows fitted with scorpion ballistae. She felt Valyrian tense, sensing prey, but she pulled him into a lazy spiral, surveying first. Inside the city, fires burned, controlled pyres, maybe of plague victims or razed districts. She saw flashes of organized movements along curtain walls. Unsullied spears glinting, harpy banners torn down. Tyrion was holding, atop the Great Pyramid, the black banner with the 3-head dragon rippled ragged but intact. She drew breath, tasting ashen brine. Her city, her proving ground. She descended slowly. Trumpets squealed from Yunkai's camp. Scorpions pivoted. The first volley of iron bolts fired, arching like flocks of metallic geese. Valyrian banked. Half the bolts overshot, sailing into river mud. Those that struck his hide bounced, leaving harmless sparks. He landed atop a dune outside catapult range. Sand erupted, burying pickets and trench spikes. She slid down his shoulder, boots finding purchase on ridged scale. Unsullied banners atop battlements shifted as soldiers pointed. She lifted her voice, pitched to carry over valley hush. "I am Daenerys Stormborn," she called in Valyrian. "I have returned." The answering roar, first from walls, then from within the city, swelling as freedmen realized, rolled across plains like thunder. Yet Yunkai's armies held formation. She saw fear, yes, but also greed, promises of gold and glory from masters who believed no dragon could stand against scorpion bolts and firepots. Very well. She climbed back upon Valyrian. He bellowed, the sound shaking siege ladders off their carts. She pointed to the lead Dramand in harbor, flagship of the Yunkish admiral according to rumors. Valyrian launched, wings stirring whirlwinds of hot sand that blinded pikemen. As they streaked over ramparts, she glimpsed Tyrion on a parapet, hair dusty, mouth agape in something between awe and relief. Over the harbor, crossbowmen atop the flagship loosed. Their quarrels never reached. Valyrian opened his jaws and released night. The flame looked black against noon sky, edged in scarlet line like molten obsidian. It struck deck, melted oak, warped iron, evaporated sailors. The ship did not ignite. It disintegrated, turning to drifting cinders that hissed across water. Nearby Dromons veered, sailors leaping overboard before heat reached. Waves boiled where cinders fell. Then Valyrian banked inland. One pass over the Yunkai main camp sufficed. Tents collapsed under blast pressure, where elephants stampeded, trampling their own mahouts. Supply wagons burst into fireless ash. Yet Daenerys directed him not to annihilate utterly. She needed survivors, messengers to every city that still doubted. At last she alighted upon the Great Pyramid's shattered apex, dragon talons anchoring in pink marble slabs once polished for the harpy idol she had toppled. Soldiers and freedmen swarmed below, craning necks. She stood tall on ridgeback, hair unbound, cloak billowing black-red, a silhouette to haunt 1,000 nightmares. Tyrion ascended the terrace, panting, flanked by Grey Worm and Missandei. He stopped within 10 paces, bowing low so that dust coated his silver-blonde curls. "Your Grace," he said hoarsely, eyes shining. "We feared." "You feared correctly," she answered, voice carrying over the plaza. "Fear and live, hope and rise." Cheers erupted, ragged at first, then swelling into a chant that drowned the bells. Mysa, Mysa. Yet beneath triumph, Daenerys sensed tremors. Wonder at the dragon resurrection, curiosity about Drogon's fate, superstition over the night flame that swallowed ships whole. She would have to craft her legend carefully, temper terror with justice lest awe curdle into rebellion. But that was counsel for dawn. Tonight she would feast upon victory, mourn Drogon in private rites, and plan the long war against Mantares and Volantis. The world was vast, but her wings were wider. She turned to Tyrion. "Summon my council." "At moonrise." Tyrion nodded. Grey Worm thumped chest. Missandei's eyes brimmed tears. She touched Daenerys' arm, whispering, "The dragon within you has found its twin." Daenerys looked skyward where Balerian's wings blotted constellations even before night fell. "Not twin," she corrected softly. "Reflection." High above, Balerion roared again, and the sound was not conqueror's boast nor beast's rage. It was the echo of Valyria's heartbeat, dead yet unforgotten, remade in bone and ember, calling the world to remember what it had tried to bury. From Bravos to Volantis, from Cartha's jade steps to King's Landing's gilded spires, men would wake tonight with hearts pounding, unsure why. They would whisper of a darkness flying west, of the doom reborn, of a queen whose fire burned colder than death and brighter than dawn. Daenerys closed her eyes, letting the chorus wash over her. Somewhere inside, the memory of a little girl in a red stone manse hugged a broken toy dragon. That girl still grieved, but she did not weep. She had been given a throne of bone and flame, and she would not fail her dream again. When she opened her eyes, dusk had painted the sky purple wine. Balerion folded his wings around the pyramid spire, a cloak of moving night. She stepped forward, arms outstretched, and the shadows welcomed her like an heir returning home. Torchlight seeped through the cracks of the Great Pyramid like rivers of molten amber, illuminating spiral staircases that echoed with hurried footfalls and whispered awe. Daenerys could feel the building's bones hum beneath her bare soles, either the lingering aftershock of Balerion's landing or the heartbeat of a city rediscovering faith. She walked slowly, robes of blackened silk whispering around her ankles, every sense drinking in the changed air. Meereen, for the first time in years, smelled not of fierce sweat and goat dung but of hot ash, forge smoke, and the sharp tang of possibility. Grey Worm awaited at the high audience chamber, helm tucked beneath one arm, cheeks streaked with soot. The unsullied commander bowed without words, but in his flint-dark eyes she read raw devotion retempered by wonder. 6 scarred veterans flanked the archway, shields painted W. It the red-black sigil of House Targaryen, freshly daubed, pigments still glistening. They saluted fist to heart as she passed, breathing Vala Dohaeris. She answered in kind, Vala Morgulis. Inside, The council had gathered in a crescent around a low ebonwood table. Tyrion leaned on his cane, one eye swollen from brick dust, but the customary smirk tugged at his lips as if to prove survival. Missandei stood beside him, quill poised above parchment. Dario lounged on a stool, fingers drumming jeweled dagger pommels, blue hair singed at the tips. Ser Barristan Selmy, returned from patrolling the western walls, sat rigid, helm in lap, silver mustache stained with sweat. Hisdar zo Lorak slunk at the far end, flanked by two brazen beasts whose harpy masks hung askew. The nobleman's gaze darted between Daenerys and the open colonnade where Balerian's tail cast shifting shadows. She took the seat carved from fossilized weirwood, its arms stylized as twin dragon heads. 5 days ago, the chair had seemed too grand. Tonight, it felt merely adequate. "I have returned," she said. "More importantly, so has the fire." She watched Hisdar swallow. Across the table, Tyrion raised brows. An invitation. She nodded. The hand cleared his throat, voice rasping from smoke. "First, your grace. Allow me to present the state of our besiegers." He flicked 2 fingers. An aide rolled out a canvas map, weighted corners with chunks of slag that still steamed faintly. "What remains of the Yunkish host camps here, along the eastern aqueduct. Their trebuchets are splintered, their elephants either roasted or trampled, and morale, according to intercepted scribbles, sits lower than a Bravos banker's conscience. They will sue for terms by dawn or attempt retreat across the Skahazaden." Dario inserted a thin grin. "Retreat? Half their foot is ash and the other half too busy fleeing phantom shadows. Nonetheless," Tyrion continued, "Volantis promises reinforcements. 10, perhaps 12,000 cell spears under the elephant standard. 2 weeks' march. They've hired Black Balak's fleet, plus. Plus. Daenerys prompted. "The dwarf side, a rumored warlock cadre from Karth, though I suspect that his puffery meant to jangle nerves." Nerves jangled indeed. Memories of the House of the Undying prickled her spine. She leaned forward, palms flat. "We will not grant Yunkai time to resupply. At dawn, dispatch envoys. Surrender unconditionally. Lay down arms. Return to your yellow city, or feed my dragon. Offer safe escort to any slave who chooses freedom." Barristan bowed head. "And if they refuse, your grace? Then they will witness a second doom." Hisdar blanched. "Majesty," he ventured, voice oily. "Meereen's granaries suffered the fires. Another campaign will strain." Tyrion cut in. "Peace, Hisdar. You'll find bread when fear of dragonfire loosens merchant coffers." Daenerys held Hisdar's gaze until he looked away. Then she turned to Missandei. "Draft proclamations in Giscari and High Valyrian, sealing our offer with my sigil. Every freedman should hear the choice." Missandei bowed and began scratching ink. Ser Barristan tapped the map. "While your grace reclaims the bay, we must shore the city. Some districts still smolder, and plague threatens in the lower wharves. Coordinate with the Shave Pate," Daenerys said. "He will see sanitation enforced. Set up infirmaries on the North Terrace. Missandei, assign healers." She paused, feeling the conversation's gravity shift to something heavier beneath. "Now," she said, voice softening, "we speak of Drogon." Silence thickened. Even Dario lowered his gaze. She felt Tyrion's curiosity prick, but the dwarf restrained comment. She told them everything. Valyria's reefs, the grayscale crust, the stone man's gift, the rod's flames, Balerian's rebirth. Her voice never faltered, though the memory scraped her throat raw. By the end, torchlight seemed to dim, as if awed by the telling. Barristan's lined face twitched once. Sorrow or horror, she could not tell. Dario stared like a gambler holding a hand of all dragons. Hisdar trembled, lips shaping silent prayers to forgotten gods. Tyrion, ever the rationalist, exhaled slow. "You bound bone and echo," he murmured. "The stuff of ancient nightmares. You realize what scholars will call this? Blasphemy?" she suggested. He chuckled, but uneasily. "Necromancy," apotheosis. Take your pick. It matters little. Legends travel faster than marching columns. By the time Volantis yawns at dawn, they'll see omens in coffee grounds. Good, she said simply. Let them drink dread. Outside, a roar rippled through night, Valyrian hunting sky currents. Sparks of ember traced his flight, comet tails swirling violet above the pyramid. The council fell instinctively silent, as if fearing the dragon might overhear their pulse. Daenerys rose. Rest. We march on the morrow, first to break Yunkai, then to carry flame east. Tonight this city sleeps beneath true protection. Tyrion inclined head. As you command, your grace, though your hand will beg one indulgence. Tomorrow's spectacle, shall we employ moderation? Exaggerated terror breeds rebellion as much as subservience. Her lips curved. I will temper the flame, my hand. But recall, I learned statecraft in cities littered with chains. He accepted the rebuke with a wry bow. The meeting dispersed. Grey Worm escorted Hisdar away under unsmiling maskless guards, symbolic shackles heavier than iron. Barristan strode to rally night patrols. Dario lingered, leaning against a pillar. You return changed, Khaleesi, he said quietly. We all change, she answered. Or we die. He smirked. Just promise you remain mortal enough for a humble soldier's admiration. She placed a hand on his shoulder, neither rejection nor invitation. Admire courage tomorrow, not me. He bowed, understanding dismissal cloaked as flattery. Moonrise found her atop the pyramid's highest balcony, alone save the crooning wind. Below, Meereen's avenues glimmered with torch processions, freedmen holding vigil for fallen kin, chanting hymns to Mother Mysa. In the foreign cadence of their grief, she heard echoes of Valyria's lost lullabies. She brought forth a bundle wrapped in black net, fragments of Drogon's obsidian horn that she had gathered amid Valyria's sand. Broken, jagged, each shard sharp enough to draw blood with a breath. She laid them on a bronze brazier. Flames danced orange-blue. Zaldriz's Emil, relaxer. My dragon, remember? She reached into the coals, palms unflinching though the heat blistered air. Her skin did not char. Warmth welcomed like kin returned. She placed each fragment among burning logs. Resin hissed. Within moments the pieces pulsed red, then white, then melted into formless black glass. Arcs of smoke spiraled skyward, weaving with Balerian's passing shadow. When the last shimmer died, she whispered 3 words: Old Valyrian for fly, hunt, rest, and watch the smoke scatter to constellations. That was all the funeral a queen of dragons could afford. Behind her, cloth rustled. Missandei emerged, cheeks damp. Forgive, your grace. The freedmen wish to know if they may sing for him tomorrow at dawn. Daenerys closed eyes, feeling the request settle like a warm cloak. Let them, she said, but make the song joyous. We celebrate his fire, not lament its loss. Missandei nodded, then hesitated. There is more. A small Khalasar has camped beyond the north gate, near the river. Their banner, blue stallion beneath a bleeding sun. They ask audience. Call Moro's remnants, Daenerys mused. She remembered the Khal who once scorned her claim. How many riders? Perhaps 800, your grace. They came after seeing Balerian's wings break the horizon. They kneel, they say, to the Veshof door, the night dragon. Send water and salt to their tents, Dany decided. At dawn I will receive them. Missandei bowed, then paused again. Your eyes burn brighter, she whispered. Daenerys smiled, though sorrow tugged corners. Perhaps I swallowed too many stars. Then may they light your path, Mysa. She slipped away. Daenerys remained until the moon tipped west, above the smudge where Yunkai's fires gutters naked along dunes. She sensed Balerian's circle once more, settling on the pyramid's lee side with a gust that ruffled her hair. Content. She retreated into the chamber where a simple pallet awaited. She slept dreamless, heart beating in rhythm not with human blood, but with wing beats roaring across spiral galaxies. Dawn arrived on a thunderhead of drums. Freedmen lined the avenue of Sarazid, voices raised in antiphonal chant. Grey worms' phalanxes parted the throng as Daenerys rode atop a palanquin of black iron drawn by 6 great pale oxen. When she reached the half-melted eastern gate, sunlight spilled across dunes where Yunkai's encampment sprawled like carrion beetles on gold dust. Envoys awaited at a half-collapsed watchtower. 2 Yunkish masters in embroidered togas, hands trembling beneath signet rings. A Volantene factor draped in tiger stripes, mouth set in defiance, and a pale-robed figure whose face remained concealed behind a sapphire veil, warlock, or charlatan promising spells for coin. They bowed low as Balerian's shadow swept overhead, churning sand into devils. Grey Worm announced terms. The masters sputtered protests about reparations, dignity, just war. Daenerys dismounted, walked forward barefoot, leaving prints that steamed. She spoke but one sentence. Bow. The warlock knelt first, veiled face pressed to sand. Perhaps he sensed futures unwritten curling in her aura. The Volantene folded second, swallowing pride. 1 Yunkish master followed, knees knocking. The last hesitated, cheeks mottling red. He drew a small glass flask from sleeve, green glass, filled with swirling mist, and hurled it at her feet. The sphere burst. A plume of pale fumes erupted, smelling of jasmine and salted blood, the hallmark of Kartha's warlocks. Daenerys felt her vision swim. Distant screams echoed within her skull. Rivers of ice crawled her veins, but flickers of ember within her bones surged bright, repelling the illusion like oil on water. She waved a hand. The smoke parted, sizzling into nothing. Balerion landed 20 yards behind, earth cratering. The master shrieked, tried to flee. The dragon's tail whipped once. Sand exploded, and the man's body vanished beneath a spray of crimson. Silence sucked the air flat. Daenerys turned to the kneeling survivors. You accepted my mercy, she said. Keep it. Take word home. Freedom devours chains. Her gaze fixed on the warlock. As for you, tell Karth they have mistaken frost for shadow. They will not survive the night I visit. The figure shuddered, then touched brow to sand in abject submission. She turned away, robe billowing, holding grief tight behind her ribs. It was too easy to burn. The challenge lay in sparing. Back within Meereen's walls, Tyrion awaited by the garrison gate. So ends parley, he quipped. 1 smote, 3 cowed, entire host in disarray before breakfast. Effective. Efficiency spares lives, she replied. They climbed tiers toward the council terrace. Along the route, freedmen flung scarlet petals. Children beat thin drums. Old men wept prayers of thanks to Lawler, Mysa, even the many-faced god, any deity that might claim dragonfire as evidence of favor. She absorbed the adoration with solemn grace, though a small voice inside wondered how quickly worship could sour. The high terrace bustled with scribes copying edicts, messengers racing, armorers distributing reforged harpy scythes now emblazoned with triple dragons. Dario reported the Yunkish host in full rout. Pack animals abandoned, supply carts set aflame to prevent capture. Ser Barristan pledged the mop-up would conclude by dusk. She gathered them all. Commanders, scribes, representatives of freedmen, the blue-vested priests of Gisker, even a deputation of canal fishers. Standing atop a slab of fused brick, she spoke without script. From this day, Meereen shall wield fear only against oppressors. You, the freed, will govern yourselves through councils elected each moon. The brazen beasts shall answer to those councils and to me. Taxes on grain will fund infirmaries, not slavers' banquets. Those who once owned souls may remain if they swear by flame and blood to uphold liberty. Break oath, and my dragon will know. Murmurs rose, hopeful, frightened, incredulous. She let them churn until momentum carried resolve. Now, she finished, send riders to Astapor, to New Guise, to the Dothraki Sea. Tell them the world changes. Tell them a black sun rises. Cheers thundered. Petals whirlwinded upward, mingling with soot. Tyrion sidled close. Fine speech, though some might prefer sun unsullied by adjectives like black. She chuckled, surprising him. Then they fail to grasp the eclipse approaching. He sobered. The Volantines will not relent. Their elephants trample softer than dragons, but they trample far. And Mantaries, I received fresh intelligence. They pledge a full legion of grotesques, Zorvagar and other abominations. Daenerys's jaw tightened. Then we cut out Mantaries like a canker before it festers. Tyrion nodded. Strategy. Take Valyrian, scorch Mantaries, shatter morale. But supply lines will stretch. We need allies nearer. The Dothraki, she said, and perhaps the Tyroshi free companies. They despise Volantis's hegemony. Bribery buys mercenaries, Tyrion agreed. But your treasury thins. She tapped a finger to lips. The vaults of new guys remain fat, protected by token garrisons. After Mantaries we ride the coast. Swift strikes, seize coin, free slaves. The dwarf's mismatch eyes gleamed. A war of liberation funded by tyrants. Poetic. She felt fatigue creep, a heaviness that no armor could disperse. I leave logistics to you, my hand. At dusk I must meet the Khalasar envoy. High grass rippled along the riverbank, silver-tipped under afternoon sun. 800 Dothraki riders knelt upon one knee, Arak blades thrust into sodden loam. Before them stood three figures. A young Khal with crescent-shaved scalp, a scarred KO chieftain whose armor jingled bone charms, and a veiled woman in indigo silk, her pregnant belly tattooed with storm spirals. Daenerys approached on foot, flanked by Grey Worm and Ser Barristan. She wore simple leather trousers, silver bells braided into loose hair, the relics of her first life on the grass sea. Valyrian circled high overhead like a storm crow. The Khal thumped chest. Khaleesi Magi Zafra, he greeted, speaking the bastardized High Valyrian adopted by raiders who plundered free cities. I am Khal Rogo. You were once blood of my father's rival. Yet my riders dreamed last night of a black dragon devouring the world's shadow. They woke screaming in glory. I come to bend knee, to follow the Shadow Mother to war. The KO added, your enemies slaughter slaves. We would hunt them. Your fire feeds our songs. The veiled woman knelt, lips trembling. Your dragon carved my child's destiny across the moon. He will ride one day. Daenerys placed a hand upon her belly. Beneath thin skin stirred life warm and fierce. Then may he know skies free of chains. She raised voice. Rise, Khal and blood riders. Ride beneath my banner. Claim the spoils of slavers for your herds. But no free man or woman shall you chain. A murmur swept the kneeling tide. Resistance tempered by fear of Valyrian's silhouette. Khal Rogo thrust fist skyward. We ride. Approving cries burst, hooves hammering earth. A new horde was born, loyal not by conquest but by vision. Ser Barristan spoke low. Your influence spreads faster than wildfire, your grace. May it not burn out of control. She met his worried gaze. We will keep banks to the river of flame. 2 nights later, Meereen's harbor swarmed with activity. Shipwrights reforged mooring posts melted by Valyrian's demonstration. 3 Giscari galleys captured intact were retrofitted with ballistae and emblazoned with the 3-headed dragon. Above, air humming with tension, Daenerys convened a war council in the Harpy's former menagerie. A courtyard now cleared of cages. Tyrion unrolled a fresh map. Mantaries to the northeast, then Illyria, Volantis, the land bridge to Slaver's Bay. Our course, he said, tapping routes. Splits forces. The main column. Unsullied, Dothraki outriders, freedmen volunteers. Marches under Grey Worm along the coastal road. Meanwhile you and Valyrian strike ahead, torch Mantaries, cripple their war beasts, sow despair. Dario interjected. I lead vanguard scouts, clear ambushes, gather fodder. Take 50 blood riders, Daenerys ordered. No looting beyond necessity. He winked. Loot only what burns. Barristan added. I advise a detachment of Unsullied to guard the Great Pyramid and Meereen's council while we campaign. She nodded approval. And Missandei will oversee governance in my absence, supported by Tyrion's correspondence. Hisdar, unexpectedly present, bowed deep. "May I, humble servant, offer treasury ledgers? Funding armies drains coffers. I will accompany to negotiate trade." Tyrion snorted. "Negotiate tribute, you mean? The queen's coffers, not yours." Daenerys raised palm. "Hisdar will remain. Prove loyalty by coordinating grain imports. Fail, and your house's name ends here." The nobleman paled. "As my queen commands." She concluded, "Departure at first light." Valyrian would fly scout at dusk, gauge Mantry's defenses, return before dawn for final counsel. Night descended thick and windless. Valyrian launched from pyramid apex, wings billowing thunder. Daenerys rode just behind his skull, cloak lashed tight. Stars wheeled overhead. Below, the Skahazadan shimmered like black obsidian in moonlight. They crossed dunes where Yunkai's abandoned camps still smoldered. The stench of burnt canvas mingled with sweet rot of corpses. Scavenger hyenas yipped at the shadow overhead, then fled squealing. Hours passed. Far ahead, volcanic hills loomed. Mantarys' watchfires glittered along ramparts of basalt, towers studded with glyph stones that pulsed faint lurid green. Daenerys felt an oily pressure behind eyes, wards of old sorcery, perhaps. She guided Valyrian higher, riding thermals until city lights shrank to candles. From this height, she glimpsed movement within walls. Large, ponderous shapes lumbering between warehouses. War beasts penned in iron arenas. She counted a dozen. Catapults perched on towers. Crews tended vats of viscous blue-black fluid, alchemical frost. Scorpion ballistae ringed the central plaza. Mantarys prepared. She traced a wide arc, scanning harbor. 2 triremes bore sigils of Volantis. Black Tiger, Red Ship. On their decks glimmered cages of hammered copper. Prisoners or slaves. She resolved to liberate them after taking the city. A sudden ripple of unease prickled her nape. She glanced downwind, saw nothing but cloud tatter. Yet Valyrian's head snapped, nostrils flaring. A hiss thrummed in the air, pitched beyond mortal hearing. Then, a spear of pale fire streaked upward from an unseen turret, trailing silver sparks. Valyrian banked. The beam grazed his left wing, carving a line of frost that crackled into ice. The dragon roared, drop-winging to shake off numbness. Daenerys clung, heart hammering. Below, atop a squat ziggurat outside city walls, she spied a contraption. A metal lattice tower brimming with jade lenses, manned by robed technicians whose hands glowed ghost fire blue. They cranked levers. Arcs of lightning danced, summoning another lance of frostlight. Valyrian wheeled. The second beam missed, too. Renning night air into rime that glittered a heartbeat, then shattered. Daenerys' blood ran cold. Mantarys' alchemists had harnessed light itself. She pictured Drogon succumbing to grayscale. Now frostfire might petrify flesh in an instant. Not tonight. She patted Valyrian's scale, guiding him into a dive beyond beam angle. They skimmed low hills, using ridges as shield. Once distance grew, she pointed homeward. Intelligence gained, risk met. She needed counsel and preparation. Protective runes for Valyrian's hide? Tactics to blind the Frostlance? Perhaps sabotage first. Halfway back to Meereen, red streaks lined eastern horizon. A heralding dawn. She exhaled, tension easing. Then, from clouds, wings emerged. Not Valyrian's reflection. Another dragon shape, thin, barbed, eyes glowing cobalt. Its hide gleamed translucent, as if sculpted from frozen smoke. It shrieked, sound brittle like cracking glass. Warlocks, Mantarys had conjured a mimic WYRM of frost. Valyrian bellowed, flame jetting instinctively. The frost dragon dodged, streaking past in blur, leaving contrails of icy mist. The temperature plummeted. Daenerys' cloak stiffened. She pressed into scale warmth. The mimic wheeled, jaws spitting shards of crystal that exploded upon contact, pocking Valyrian's armor with snowy scars. Valyrian's counterbreath swallowed Mimic's tail. Frost plates cracked, exposing hollow void inside. No blood, only vapors. Still it fought, agile as smoke. They spiraled, exchanging scorching night fire and freezing shards. Each clash birthed clouds of steam lit by dawn. Daenerys' muscles screamed from strain-gripping ridges. She felt the mimic's cunning, guided by remote sorcery. Strike not to kill but to wound, sap, stall until Mantarys unleashed greater weapons. No time. She scanned horizon. There, a narrow bank of cirrus catching first sun. Heat, light. She urged Valyrian skyward, dragon muscles surging. The mimic chased, deadly silent. They burst into sunlight. Frost crust melted from Valyrian's wing. Below, the mimic's translucent hide glimmered painfully bright. Valyrian flipped, dive-bombing. At last moment Daenerys cried, "Skoros a Pradagon!" Dark flame. Valyrian exhaled an arc of black fire condensed into a spear, narrow as lance, dense as starcore. It impaled the mimic through breast. A scream like shattering mirrors ripped sky. The frost dragon evaporated, dissolving into snowflakes that glittered, falling on warm thermals until only memory remained. Daenerys sagged, forehead resting on hot bone. She whispered thanks in Valyrian, but victory tasted of foreboding. Mantarys wielded weapons unknown even to pyromancers. The campaign ahead would challenge more than fire. The council assembled an hour past sunrise, bleary-eyed. Daenerys relayed every detail. Frostlance, mimic dragon, war beast count. Tyrion paced, muttering. Barristan frowned deeply. Missandei sketched glyph tower design for engineers. Grey Worm spoke curt resolve. Unsullied fear, no sorcery. Tyrion retorted, "Courage matters not if flesh turns marble in a blink." He turned to Daenerys. "We need counter-alchemy. I recall ass-high scrolls describing mirror smoke that deflects light spells. Perhaps we could harvest obsidian dust." "Missed your dragon's wings." Dario slapped table. "Why not strike tonight? Sabotage that tower before they can fire Fodderly Frost." Daenerys considered. "A stealth raid. Blood Riders know terrain. Tyrion organizes alchemical countermeasures. I will strike when the tower falters." Barristan volunteered to lead infiltration. She refused. Age alone no hindrance, but she needed his wisdom alive. Dario lobbied, and she granted command. 50 Dothraki scouts, 2 assassins adept in smoke bomb craft. They would depart dusk. Meanwhile, Grey Worm drilled unsullied in shield formations resilient to frost shards, overlapping turtles of black iron. Freedman weaponsmiths coated spears with dragonglass infusions discovered in Valyria, material that absorbed heat, might resist ice. Inside the pyramid forges, Tyrion supervised experiments, coating small shields in obsidian powder using boiling tree resin. When exposed to frost alchemy, the prototypes crack but absorb most chill. Promising. Afternoon bled into golden evening. Meereen buzzed, a hive arming for exodus. Valyrian rested coiled around pyramid, watched children feed him goats through iron bars. He tolerated gently, though his ember eyes tracked each motion like falling stars. Daenerys spent twilight walking streets incognito, cloaked and hooded. She listened to freedmen discussing new councils, some fearful, some jubilant. She passed formerly opulent manses, now communal orphanages, saw scribes teaching children letters shaped like dragons. Change had begun, fragile as newborn flame. She must shield it from winds. Back at her chambers, she found a letter sealed with wax bearing a dragon skull, delivered by unknown courier. She broke seal. Queen of Ash and Dawn. Word spreads fast. Across the narrow sea, crows carry tales. That you ride Valyrian reborn, that you melt cities to song, that you would shatter every chain. I watched once as your father torched Harrenhal. I felt the heat and smelled the rot. Power alone cannot mend a realm. When the day comes you cross Westeros, you will find Storm's End closed against shadows, yet perhaps not against justice. Prove you are more than fire, and you may find allies in unexpected halls. Stannis Baratheon, Lord of Dragonstone. She read twice. Stannis, living still, holding Storm's End? Intelligence outdated. Last she knew, the Iron Throne contested between feuding Lannister and Tyrell proxies. Westeros had moved on while she battled slavers. Allies among Baratheon remnants could accelerate conquest. But trusted? She folded letter into inner pocket. The hour of infiltration neared. She climbed to pyramid apex. Dario and his hand-picked riders assembled below, faces streaked with ash, wearing mantles the color of desert night. She descended, clasped Dario's wrist. "Return to me," she said. He waggled brows. "I relish any excuse, Khaleesi." He swung onto pale horse, gave brief whistle. Scouts melted into darkness, riding north under waning moon. She watched until dust swallowed their silhouettes. Valyrian rumbled restless. He sensed tension. She stroked scale, murmured lullabies. Hours crept. At third moonrise, a distant flare bloomed green on horizon. The signal. Sabotage begun. She mounted Valyrian. Tyrion, perched nearby, brandished obsidian-coated bolus. "Throw these into the beam," he instructed. "The crystals should refract and overload." She strapped pouch to saddle ridge. "Your mind is as sharp as ever, imp. I pray your aim matches." She smiled thinly, then soared. Night air tasted copper. River below flashed silver. Clouds parted to reveal Mantaries, its wards pulsing ominous jade. But atop the frost tower, chaos. Scaffolds ablaze, robed figures flailing, screams floating on wind. Dario's work. Valyrian dived. The frost lance attempted ignition. Beams sputtered, refracted by smoke. She hurled 3 bolus. They whirred, trailing obsidian dust, striking lattice. A crack of thunderous light erupted. Shards of crystal exploded outward. The tower folded as if kneecapped, collapsing in a shower of arcs. Within walls, war beasts roared. Soldiers scrambled to man scorpions. Daenerys drew deep breath, exhaling steady. Dracarys. Valyrian unleashed a sweeping cone of void fire. It raked ramparts, melting iron ballista strings, devouring parapets. War beasts stampeded through ruptured gates, trampling their own handlers. She targeted siege storerooms. Blasts ignited munitions, chain explosions painting night crimson. Mantaries burned, but she did not flatten all. She aimed precise, sparing civilian quarters. Terror, not genocide. Below, her scouts signaled retreat. She circled thrice, ensuring Frostlance ruined, then veered south to rejoin encamped army. At dawn, columns marched through Mantaries' blasted gates unopposed. Unsullied secured citadel, freeing thousands of slaves bred for alchemical experiments. Soldiers found vaulted libraries of scrolls bound in WRM leather. Tyrion salivated at knowledge. Engineers confiscated barrels of frost alchemy. Daenerys ordered samples preserved, rest destroyed. Mantaries' Archon fled via hidden tunnels. Pursuit parties tracked him toward Volantis. Daenerys did not follow, yet. She erected a podium in Central Plaza, before the shattered frost tower stump. Freed slaves trembled. She ascended steps, clad in ash-speckled cuirass, and spoke. "I am not here to rule Mantaries. I am here to break its chains. You will choose leaders, rebuild homes. Should tyranny rise again, my dragon returns." She instructed Grey Worm to install temporary garrison. 100 unsullied commanders to train new guard chosen from freed. Dothraki seized stockpiles of grain and horses as spoils. Plenty to feed march. Over following days, emissaries from Valyria and Tolos arrived bearing tribute, pledging neutrality, eager to avoid Mantaries' fate. Daenerys accepted coin, livestock, but demanded release of slaves. Some balked. Valyrians' leisurely glide overhead persuaded. Tyrion compiled reports. Volantis amassing fleets on Rhoyne Delta. Volantene Triarchs incited by Mantaries' fall. Carthene warlocks offering alliance to Volantis in exchange for captured dragon foci. Danger escalated. Yet good tidings matched. Tarash's Archon signaled desire for alliance. Mutual opposition to Volantene domination. They offered Scarlet Archers renowned for precision. Khal Rogo's scouts claimed 3 more Khalasars drifting to join, enamored by tales of the Night Dragon. Momentum surged. One evening, As Warhost camped on Mantares' smoking outskirts, a raven arrived. Its scroll bore the direwolf sigil of House Stark, news from Westeros via covert channels of Varys perhaps. She broke seal. To Daenerys Stormborn, rightful queen of Westeros, I am Sansa Stark, Lady of Winterfell. The realm bleeds. Cersei Lannister sits uneasy on the throne, propped by mercenaries and fear.
Euron gradioi haunt seas.
The north endures famine and unending winter. Rumors of your return reach us across ice and salt. If you come as liberator, not conqueror, the north will parley. But prove with deeds, not words.
Sansa Stark.
Daenerys traced the elegant yet firm script. She felt threads weaving, Baratheon offer, Stark's cautious outreach. Westeros's chessboard awaited, but first Volantis must fall. She summoned council, plotted naval strategy, capture Illyria's drydocks to build fleet, leverage Teroshi archers, integrate Mantarian refugees to guide river fords. Valyrian would neutralize Volantene towers along Rhoyne mouth. Thereafter, march west to break chains in old Volantis' slave markets. Logistics unfurled across maps like red ribbons. She delegated, trusting each lieutenant's zeal tempered by her flame. On the eve of departure, she walked Mantares' ruined boulevards. Children chased coals still glowing, laughing. A ragged boy presented her with a crude clay medallion, a dragon circled by sun and moon. She accepted, pressed copper coin into his palm, and knelt. "What is your name?" "Rian," he whispered. "Rian, keep faith. The world is forging anew." He smiled gap-toothed. She rose, strolling toward horizon where Valyrian perched on basalt outcrop, wings mantled like night's cloak. Stars mirrored ember flecks in his eyes. She climbed his foreclaw, seating upon familiar ridge. She spoke into dusk. "We go to Volantis, old friend. Past the Rhoyne, then west across seas my ancestors once mastered. But we go as more than conquerors, we go as breakers of worlds built on bones." Valyrian's chest thrummed, deep and steady, like drums echoing across centuries. She rested a hand upon scale and closed eyes. Visions flared. Aegon's landing. Harrenhal melt beneath dragonfire. Drogon's last breath. A throne of swords melted into plowshares. She saw herself striding a rebuilt red keep garden where children read scrolls under lemon trees. She saw winter ending. She opened eyes to dawn's first blush over ruins. Her army stirred, thousands of spears, galloping riders, standard-bearers lifting banners where the triple-headed dragon intertwined with a black sun.
Belsran.
Drums thundered, distant horns signaled columns forming. Daenerys Targaryen, Stormborn, breaker of chains, mother of dragons, now rider of the night sun, lifted arms. "Fly," she commanded. Valyrian launched. Wind tore petals from Mantares' lone surviving peach tree, sending them swirling like rose ash. The host below cheered. Sunlight caught black scales, painting prismatic arcs across sky, heralding a new age. As dragon and queen soared northwest, shadow sweeping over valleys, the world shifted. Across seas and continents, kings woke restless, priests read omens, mothers hushed children with stories of the night dragon. Hammers rang in forges, pens scratched treaties, ravens took wing. Hope and terror braided in equal measure. Yet within the storm's eye, Daenerys felt only calm, a gravity pulling her toward destiny, Drogon's echo guiding each heartbeat, Valyrian's ancient might burning in marrow. She whispered to winds, "We go onward, and we do not stop." The horizon answered with silence poised on the cusp of thunder, as though holding breath for the next roar that would shatter all remaining chains.